Hello, welcome. Welcome to Thank You Half Hour. My name is Tom Christopher Warren, and today's guest is so special to me. I've known him for so many years, and while this is and will always be a theater-centric podcast and discussion, Mark and I met in the theater, and he has transitioned into really remarkable things beyond the arts, I should say expanding on the arts into the world of fitness. So my guest today is Mark Fisher, founder of Mark Fisher Fitness, dear friend. He's a remarkable human being. If you don't know who he is, and probably most of you do already, but if you don't, by all means, find him online. If you're in New York and if you're looking for any sort of fitness nutrition to change your lifestyle for the better in any way, reach out. So welcome, please, Mark Fisher. Hi, friend.
Oh, what a joy to be here, my friend.
Joy to see you. Truly. It's been too long.
Too long. Here we are.
Here we are. How are you, sir? Are you in New York?
I am in New York. Yeah, I'm in New York both today and now generally. After spending a couple years living upstate, I thought I wanted to live amongst the trees, but as it happens, I am fated to die in a skyscraper with a martini in hand, as I always knew I would be. So I loved being upstate. I loved the trees, but my wife and our 1.5-year-old baby moved back this summer briefly.
Yeah.
Thinking, well, let's get an apartment in the city. We want to be there a little bit more. And then we accidentally just, before we moved back, Sheena, God love her. My wife is a Broadway performer. So a classic Sheena move. She had 2 Broadway offers within a month upon returning, as she does.
Sure.
Ultimately wound up taking Spamalot. So she's been in that. So it's been great to be back in the city and have Sheena back on Broadway and enjoy all the things that New York has to offer.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Tell me you and I met many years ago. We worked on a production of a new musical, and I know very little about where you're from and what got you into the theater initially.
Yeah.
What inspired you to go into the theater?
Oh, yeah. So, well, man, I think unfortunately, a lot of people, for me, the theater was an opportunity to play pretend, right? Without getting too much into the Freudian stuff. It's no secret. I think there's a number of people drawn to fantasy and this opportunity to pretend there are other people that are drawn to stakes and drama, which, for me really began with an interest in movies. And I remember as a child, I really loved movies and TV. And I actually originally had wanted to be a director. By the time I was 6, I was demanding my parents take me to New York City and get me an agent. They never did that, by the way. They ruined my career because they refused to do that. They kept saying, next year, when you're 8, we'll bring you to the city. Because I'm from Southern New Jersey, so not too far, but it's fair to say I was pretty goal directed from a young age.
Yeah.
And then, I think probably most people that wanted, maybe, I don't know, other people that wanted to be film actors as children, the one thing that, of course, was available to me was the theater, which knew that was going to be part of my path. I knew that was going to be good training for what I had hoped to be a career as a, movie, TV actor person. And it was through that I found 2 things. I think, first of all, I fell in love with what the theater was, even though, again, I really kind of began because I'm like, all right, well, this is one way I can play pretend. And I found myself strangely, I think, probably for a young straight guy my age, enamored with musicals. I found musicals, and wow, boy, did I fall in love. Did I go to the library and methodically rent out original cast recordings I would then meticulously make cassette tape recordings of, because, of course, it's one thing to have the original cast recording of Jesus Christ Superstar, but there's also the Atlanta recording with the independent artists, and of course the Australian recording with John Farnham. And I just fell in love with the theater. And I think the other thing that pertains to, I think, some of the ways my life has since played out is it was also the first time I felt really a part of a community. Mm. And I don't think that wasn't something I think I would have even known that I was looking for. But, to love the musical theater as a young man is not synonymous with being deeply popular, Tom. I know it's hard to imagine that, but
it's
not synonymous with deep social popularity. And, I grew up in a lower middle class area and I had friends, but I think in retrospect, there was a certain distance I felt from them, which now I can look back and say, okay, well, there's some different maybe values. And when I found the theater people, it was like this community, these other people that like the things that I like, and they've heard of these things that I'm interested in. Until then, I had been studying completely in a silos. I became an obsessive fan of the theater, and importantly, it was the first time I can recall being in a community of people that I felt really saw the full me, really cared for the full me, like challenges and all. Knowing I was an imperfect person, even at that age, and particularly at that age, and that was really really powerful, right? And even though I continue to love theater as a craft, it really was, I think, the community piece that tipped me over the line and said, like, okay, maybe it's not even TV film, like these are the people, right? As the whole saying goes, right, it's not always a great way to make my living, but man, what a beautiful way to make our life.
Well, it's funny you bring up the community, the social aspect of this sort of tribe of humans and artists that we surround ourselves with. You're also, and I say this arguably, but good luck arguing, you're the most well-read person I've ever met in my life, and no one does a deep dive like Mark Fisher. So you talking about diving into the theater, at some point that shifted for you, and you started diving into health and fitness and nutrition. And how did you marry that with your love of theater? Because you have found a marriage that is really remarkable.
Certainly. I mean, I think essentially what happened was, practically in my 20s, I had moved to New York City. I found, as many young actors do, that to be challenging because there's a lot of things that are just not in your control.
Yeah.
I was not a kid that came to the city with any help from my family. And as an artist, particularly, and this is the thing too, because I would maybe challenge this claim at this point, but at that time particularly, which admittedly was before the era of cameras and other ways I think people could make, it's a little bit easier to actually make some kinds of art now than it was then, though. Even then, if I were thinking clearly, I probably could have taken more accountability for my life and my career, but my perception was, I'm constantly putting myself out there and I just have no control. And there's so many people going into these rooms. And for me, fitness started because, number one, I had hoped that, okay, well, if I can put on some muscle, that can make me more marketable.
Sure. Number
two, maybe it's more likely that girls will kiss me, which, that was definitely like a leading factor, which is, funny because in the musical theater, there are certain odds that work in your favor if you happen to have the good fortune of being a straight man surrounded by these beautiful theater women. The maybe slightly inappropriate sort of old David Mamet quote that the reason to do TV and film is to make money. The reason to do theater is the same since the time of Aeschylus, to get girls. And to be fair, that wasn't explicitly true for me. But all that to say, as a young man in New York, I wanted to put on weight. I started studying training. And the thing that really captured me was, as much as I loved the theater, there was such an obvious connection between my inputs and my outputs. Right? Because we both know you can rehearse and do so much work and get coachings and really work on yourself as an artist. But particularly with commercial theater, there's going to be a lot of things in play why you do or do not get that role when you're in the room.
Right.
And that's not to say that, it's a completely one-to-one ratio with fitness, but part of what I ultimately became so interested in was fitness is often in the psychological literature thought of as a keystone habit. Because when you begin to show mastery around how you're eating, how you're training, how you're sleeping, you begin to see this direct proof of your own volition. Because you're doing these things and you begin to see changes in how you feel in your body and your self-confidence. And that was very, very powerful. So as you mentioned, I really get into things, right? So this became the new thing that I got into. So I got really into fitness. And for a long time, it was concurrent with acting and they were happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
But because I'm very enthusiastic and, obnoxious, depending on how you define it, I couldn't help but tell my friends I was so interested in this thing. Yeah. So then I started training people for free while I was doing shows, knowing that I didn't really know what I was doing, but my friends wanted to also work out and I liked it, and then at a certain point, sort of bring us up maybe a little bit to MFF and some more present day stuff. I kind of got to inflection point in my career where I was like, all right, I need something else to bring in some cash. And I really like training. So let me get my actual cert. Let me work in New York Sports Club. I had two brothers getting married a month of December. I was like, oh, I can't do any work for 6 months. All right, I'm going to become an actual real trainer.
Yeah.
And really from kind of the get-go, once I knew I actually had a cert and started to feel a little bit more like, okay, I think I know what I'm talking about here. I started training more and more of my friends who happened to be mostly people in the community. And then for several years, I continued to do both. And eventually got to the place where the tug of my interest in my nascent entrepreneur instincts started to pull on me harder. But the real conflict I felt was, how do I do this thing while not being part of the only community I have ever felt accepted in,
Right.
these people that are my lifebloods, these very, very dear friends of mine. And then that is, for me, has been the joy and strange Mark Fisher Fitness is, I was like, well, I'll just make a weird gym for my friends. And really from the get-go, it really was always, okay, how do I take the best approaches to training and fitness, which I did work very hard to really understand, but how do I package it in a way that these people that I love will find it accessible, right? Like, how do I package it in a way that, the young female dancers in the chorus that don't feel safe in gym spaces can feel like cared for, or, whatever show I'm doing where I'm the young ingenue and, I'm sitting next to the older, queer character actor who I know has some things about this and maybe wants some things to be different in his body and, maybe wouldn't say it as much, but I know is causing him pain.
I
But I
feel so
love him
seen
so
right
much.
now.
And we have so much fun together, like saying and doing, and me saying really inappropriate things and us laughing about it. And I wanted to make something for him, and in many ways, like that's kind of how Mark Fisher Fitness was born, and certainly for anybody not from MFF, if you go to the website, there'll be things that you can't unsee. It's like safe-ish for work. I'd say it's safe-ish for work.
Sure.
And the whole point was like, all right, how do I bring together my love of fitness for my friends who, particularly in the beginning, were all theater people.
Yeah.
They were all theater people.
Yeah. Well, and serious fitness, ridiculous humans, right? That was when I was in New York and there, that was the slogan and the sort of thesis of it. And
yes,
is it still?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing like it. And I watched it's largely class-based, or it was then.
Yeah, absolutely.
You sit in this room filled with other ridiculous people who are there for their various reasons, right? You always ask the class, what's your why?
Yeah.
Why are you here? And you go long enough, you see familiar faces. Obviously, you're building a community there as well. But I remember a woman who was always in the back of the class, tall, and of us sort of ish my age, probably 10 years younger than me, in her 40s, early 50s maybe, and giant sunglasses, behind which she appeared to, through my lens, to be hiding, and always stood in the back. And months later, I noticed that she was in the front. The sunglasses were gone. She was smiling. She was engaging. And I watched in my time with MFF people change their lives for the better. Yes, they sometimes lost weight. They sometimes gained muscle tone, like all of those superficial things that are, part of many people's why happened. But people were leaving bad relationships that they weren't happy in. They were leaving jobs they weren't happy in. They were seeking out jobs that would bring them joy. They were seeking out entrepreneurial opportunities because that's what you do. It is a magical place that has kind of no real description, but the magic is palpable, and I can't recommend it enough to anybody who's looking to make some sort of change in their life and gain some sort of positive input and output. MFF is the place to do it. If you're in New York, go seek them out. Why do you like working with, obviously you like working with artists because they're your tribe, but what about training artists? What is that as opposed to, muggles?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, I'll say this. I certainly, I'm down to train everyone, but obviously there's something to be said for, an understanding of what it means to be an artist and understanding what it means to be in spaces that require lots of rejection and exclusion because there are only so many gigs and there are so many people. It's also true. And, I should say here, it's been, several years since I've been doing actually training myself, but the thing that I was also very interested in was the fact that actors, that artists require and need a real facility for movement. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's most interesting to this day is, you know, particularly when I was still doing lots of training and was still sometimes doing consultations, we would take people through something called the movement screen.
Yeah.
And the very fascinating observation I made, this is like not exactly on the one, but kind of like if you were a Tony nominated actor, you crush the movement screen, even if you were a famously bad dancer. And I will not say names to protect the innocent, protect the guilty, but truly it was remarkable how often, holy cow, this individual is, I know to be a very well-known actor in a name, but their facility, just the way their body moves is kind of remarkable, even if,
Mm.
like I said, in some of those cases, they weren't a dancer by any means, by any stretch, but there was just a certain balance of mobility in their body that, of course, as an artist, even if you're not a dancer, that's your instrument, right? It's cliche, but it's nonetheless true. So, to take care of the physical well-being of particularly performing artists, where that's how they make their work, and to think that you can help them have more longevity, to
Yeah.
feel physically better, to in some cases create more possibility and opportunity for what they can do with their instrument, is very fun, like very, very, very satisfying. Particularly because the reality is a lot of people that do what we do don't have that firsthand knowledge,
Yeah.
and admittedly, again, I want to acknowledge, like, certainly we still work with a lot of performers. I don't mean to make it sound like they're all artists. And at this point, I have an amazing team that's,
Of course.
both running the show and fulfilling a lot of that training. And not all of them are former professional artists, though in practice, most are still.
Yeah.
I think it's like, that's still like
Kind of.
70% former actors. But yeah, it's very satisfying.
I mean, I have to say, for me, having moved out of New York and continued to train, and I've worked with some really wonderful trainers, but no one has taken the care, as much care as MFF's team, in terms of my knowledge of form and, healthy form,
Yeah.
and just understanding how to keep my body sustainably safe as I, continue in my career and continue to try to build, my physique goals, right? So
Yeah.
everything that we did at MFF was so form centric that I feel very confident now. And I'm by no means a lifter, or God knows I'm certainly not a dancer, but I can now walk into a gym and go, I'm fairly comfortable that I'm not going to hurt myself because of bad form. And that's entirely due
Oh,
to
I
you
love
all.
that. Thank you
Entirely
so
due to you
much.
all.
That,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, that's certainly one of our hopes too, is help people, because the reality is there's not an unlimited number of things you need to know. There's an unlimited number of movement patterns.
mm,
And over time, if people can understand, it's a little reduction, but not really, to say, we're looking to create the fullest range of motion possible while the joints are in neutral positions and the muscles are creating the movement as opposed to joints and ligaments. And again, like, that is maybe a little gibberish to listeners. That's maybe not intuitive exactly what that means, but it's not there's an unlimited amount of things people need to learn, particularly if you're just learning about yourself and your body.
yeah, yeah.
And that also has always been one of the things we aspire to do. The promise of our 6-week makeover program, Snatch in 6 week, which, incredibly is now in its 14th year. The
What?
promise was always, yeah, I know, Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes.
Looney
And
Tunes.
we're just zhuzhing her up. We actually gave her this cycle off because the people that are, the amazing people that are running these days took her asleep, hibernated for this cycle, and are bringing back an upgraded, new and
Wow.
improved version with a number of really meaningful tweaks. So yeah, so the promise of that program was always like, I can't make you a great trainer in 6 weeks, but in 6 weeks, I can help you sift through the many confusing messages you get from the media and tell you, at least through my assessment, which I think is pretty credible, the basics that you need to know about, like, what your body needs to be taken care of and what that means for sleep and for
Yeah.
nutrition and for the basics of how we create movement in a way that it will both create longevity, but also give you a stimulus so you achieve fitness, right? And that might also be fat loss, but it's also hopefully heart health.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's muscular strength, muscular endurance, so that whatever it is you do, whether you're an artist where that's obviously very foundational, or even just like a normal human that just wants to get up and down and play with your kids, or just want
Right.
to feel confident to go in the boardroom, all of that stuff is, I think, facilitated by really, nourishing and taking care of your body. And I know it's confusing out there, so it's always been my dream to try to bottom line is for people like here's what the research says, and
Yeah.
here's the simplest way for you to do it, and go with God.
Well, and you've always said that you're so well read so that we don't necessarily have to be. In order to sift through all of the gibberish, and you've
Certainly.
always been successful at it. You've been then able to come and give us the necessary tools that we can then go fly like the birds we are.
Yeah,
What?
it's certainly been the intention. Yeah.
Yeah. Before I wrap you up, oh God, it's so great to see your face. It really is. I'm so proud of everything you're doing and have always been. What you mentioned, Snatched in 6 weeks, is getting zhuzhed up. What else is coming up on the
Yeah.
horizon that you're excited about?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's really an interesting time. I mean, the one thing I'll say is, at my role at MFF has really transitioned in the past few years, in
Mm.
that there's now, a separate leadership team that runs most of the day to day. We have and we've actually still got a fair number, happy to say a fair number of trainers you probably would still recognize.
Uh,
We've also got not a lot of new blood,
yeah.
and that's both been exciting, and of course has created opportunities for us to continue to re-examine what is our culture, what does this place mean, how is it evolving, because on the one hand we want to be true to certain values, on the other hand we don't want to be stagnant. So everything from the
Mm.
product values, the way we approach it, there's this sweet spot of evolution, but also honoring the legacy and like what this place has meant and what it stands for.
Yeah.
So that's been very fun too, because that's allowed me to move into a little bit more of a mentor position, which has been very, very satisfying with some people that I really have huge admiration for, and to watch them run with it and step up and put their own spin on has been very, very gratifying. Outside of that, I'll just say briefly on the work front in general. I also have had the opportunity to open up the first of what would be a number of locations of another fitness concept that's not Mark Fisher Fitness
Really?
in northern New Jersey. Yeah, and that's been interesting too, because MFF is, I love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
We are, I'll say all the things because, hopefully not too many ninjas are listening, but I would say this, but we're just not like publicly blasting it. So MFF is also currently looking for other locations. But in practice, MFF's a weird place for people
Totally.
not familiar. You'll see through our Instagram. We're not expecting to have MFF in Nebraska. So
Right.
that gym, we'd like to have maybe 5 locations, we think, in the New York City area. And without boring people the details, there's things that I love about that business that just don't scale as the business
Sure.
for. It's a little complicated. And I'm just like not going to make the hard choice to do it because I don't care. It's my love letter to humanity. It's a little bit broken in some places, and like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care. I like it. It's great. And also it's a great business,
Yeah.
So this other business is interesting for me because it's not based around me. And frankly, even though I'm a 50-50 partner, I'm again in a little more of an investor advisor role.
Sure.
So it's been fun to apply a lot of the skills I've learned at MFF in a much simpler, theoretically more scalable model. And then Business for Unicorns is actually where I spend most of my time. And that's a company that does coaching and consulting mostly on the business of fitness. So helping other people that want to run gyms, not exactly like MFF, but kind of like MFF, but maybe not crazy.
Sure.
Help them understand how to run a gym, how to develop a culture, how to do everything from lead generation to building a team to understanding finances. And those are the main things. The thing I'll share briefly here, maybe at the end, is a little bit of a tease, which I haven't really talked about much publicly, and there's no commitments yet. The thing I'm actually interested in at this point, I am maybe paralysis is maybe going to be like a really bad idea of me. I continue to be fascinated actually now by the business of Broadway because I've spent years studying business. So now it feels like there's this like fourth act that's starting to percolate where I'm like, let me look at the profit and loss statement of that. So yeah, I'll apologize illusions. I keep under wraps right now, but I've actually got some plans for the next few years of some moves I'd like to make in that world that, for me feels like, okay, this might be, now it's all coming together. It's like my career as an artist and my undergraduate degree and the network and the people I've met through Mark Fisher Fitness. And then my studies as somebody that runs a business and understands like how that stuff happens. And, my understanding of the way investments work at this point in my career. So that's early innings there, but, it's an honor to be on this podcast because for somebody that does fitness, Broadway continues to remain kind of a main thread of my life. And, I'm excited to see some opportunities where I might have I might come back in a more direct way. So
I love
stay
it.
tuned, listeners.
No one can synthesize a variety of ideas into one sort of remarkable thesis like you. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. I
Oh,
can't
thank you,
wait.
buddy.
I'm so proud of you. And we'll have to have a whole nother chat just about your family. You're a father now. I'm thrilled for you. Look at your
I know
smile.
it.
Yeah.
I know it. A father who you'll know, Tom, is obsessed with the Lion King.
Stop it. Love it.
We watch The Lion King every day. She calls it Baby Dada Roar.
Baby Dada Rar. I love it. Well, what, she's 1.5
Baby
now?
Dada Roar.
So
Yeah.
few more years before she goes to see the show. But when you take her, we'll
Oh yeah,
get you
I'll
all
be
around
excited
backstage.
to. Oh yeah, honestly, please do. She is obsessed, and
I
it's a
love
little
it.
bit of time away, but I cannot wait to uh, share
Love it.
Broadway in general with her. The Lion King, knowing how obsessed she is, it's going to be. I think that's going to be peak dad.
That's amazing. I love you, friend. It's great to see your face. It really is. I'm thrilled for you, proud of
I adore
you.
you.
Please give everyone my love, and we'll talk soon.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for being here. Bye, honey.
All right, that's half hour.
Thank you, half hour.
Boxland Media. Think big.